Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com, here with 10 mistakes to avoid while playing Dynasty Warriors Origins. So I had never even played part of the series, and my only time playing some similar game to Dynasty Warriors was Hyrule Warriors with my son using like Zelda characters. So this game was really foreign and very challenging for me, and I made basically every mistake possible. By the time you watch this video, I will have over 70 hours playing early, and I want to make this video to have you avoid all the stupidity and mistakes that I've made. So watch this video if you want to learn what not to do in Dynasty Warriors Origin, a game I love and was shocked by the quality. Okay, first thing up about Dynasty Warriors Origin is kind of what the game is in the overview. You're basically parked in the three kingdoms of the mainland of China, and you have a nameless hero protagonist, and you're kind of finding out your identity, going around the kingdom, encountering a bunch of NPCs, warring factions and clans. And through that, you're going to discover the game mechanics very slowly. It is an extremely large game, so some of the footage you're going to see, you're like, I don't have that yet. Just realize it will come to you. It took me 50 hours of beelining the main story to beat the game, and I wish I would not have beelined the main story because there's a lot to explore into. So realize the game will introduce you to these mechanics slowly. If you're not there yet, just keep it in the back of your head. So let's get started with the number one tip to avoid, which sounds kind of odd. That's not buying weapons. So the first mistake I made was buying weapons. In every other game, usually you can buy weapons with gold or your currency, and this is typically the best path to power. And I would disagree with Dynasty Warrior Origins, because the amount of gold you spend, regardless if you're at the start of the game or the end, is a mind-boggling amount, and you really don't get that much more powerful. There's something better to spend your gold on, I'll tell you in a second. There are 10 different weapon types in the game. So your interface will show 9, but there's actually a 10th one unlocked after you beat the main campaign. And you're going to be introduced to these weapons just by playing the main campaign, beating individual bosses, missions, and so on. So there's really no shortcut to getting these weapons earlier. They're going to drop, and you're going to get a UI pop-up that says new weapon type. It'll show you a slow introduction, kind of some, like usually a small video of showing some cool skill or something like that. There is one exception to buying weapons, and that's if one becomes available on the shop that you haven't found yet. Specifically, the spear early on is an example of this. So there's really no way to rush this process in getting a bunch of new weapons. Just play the story, do the missions, the campaign, and you will be slowly introduced to getting these weapon types. Why this is a mistake is, when I was first playing, I spent all my gold not on consumables, which are called portables, but weapons. And I only got a little bit of attack power and slightly better traits. And then usually the next campaign or the next mission, I would find something radically better than what I just purchased and spent all my gold, all my material on this weapon. So don't do that. The goal while you're leveling and playing until you beat the campaign the first time is really just to experiment with the weapons, try them out, and start leveling their proficiency, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So don't panic, freak out, and say, I gotta spend all of my currency to upgrade and get 10 more attack power. That next mission, you're likely to find something a little bit better, and you're going to be like, dang, why did I spend all of that gold on that? So what you should spend your money on is number 2, buying, they're called potables, something like that. They're consumables. I'm going to call them that. So consumables, you're going to get access to not right away at the game, but later on they become absolutely critical for beating high difficulty, high combat battles. So you're going to get a bunch of them kind of that increase your defense, attack power, can heal you, or even heal the group. So this is incredibly useful. When you very first start, you're going to get meat buns. These are going to be heals. Think of them as like potions. You're not going to get a whole lot of them, but you'll be able to get passives that increase the amount and the amount they heal you for. So you have a couple of different ways to heal. You'll be able to destroy pots and collect these meat buns throughout the world, throughout the battle environment, but they're critical because you have very little ability to heal. You also don't have to buy these, and they're replenished right away. But once you start accessing the consumables, they become absolutely a game changer, especially on hard battles. Some of them that I like are strength potions. This is going to increase attack by 60% for a limited time. Once you use this in the lower left of your user interface, it'll have a kind of a countdown, not numeric, but it'll be the color. So it'll start gray and start going down. That's how you know it's active and when it runs out. And then 1 Essence of Vitality restores health by 70% for you and nearby allies. More on this, but this is critical to always bring to the toughest battles if you can. And there's going to be 2 Arbor Green and Crimson Crest. These are not going to be unlocked right away. You're going to have to do something with a medic that you're going to encounter a little bit later. A couple side quests where you go gather some material. The Arbor Green is going to increase proficiency gain by 200% until you defeat 100 enemies. This is extremely useful for power leveling and progression. More on that later. And then the Crimson Crest will straight up give you 20 skill points. These both cost 5,000 gold, so they can be kind of expensive, but if you're not buying weapons, this will allow you to dramatically progress your rank and your skills, giving you way more power than just buying a sword that gives you a little bit more attack power. Trust me, do this. So if I were you when you very first start out, focus on the skill trees that give you anything that increases the amount of meat buns, the amount of healing, and the amount of consumables you can bring to combat. Always bring a strength potion and Essence of Vitality because it heals not only you, but allies around you. And especially if those win-loss conditions are really tricky, where it's not just about you surviving, but it's about 2, 3 allies or companions, it gets really tricky to actually beat those battles. Next up is number 3. You need to complete missions, and you need to do them as soon as they become available and not do what I did, is just skip them. Oh, I'll do them later. What missions are essentially side quests. You have your main campaign, which are called battles, right? These are the big yellow markers. This is what progresses the story. As you complete them, different things become unlocked, like skirmishes or these missions. The icon's a little bit different. It's an orange, a little bit of smaller icon. And why these are useful is they're going to grant you guards. You'll get that a little bit later. People that follow you around, little NPCs, and accessories. These accessories are like jewelry in other RPG games that give you powerful bonus like attack power, defense, so on and so forth. So if you skip these, it's very hard to go back and get them, if not impossible. So what I did and what I screwed up was I just beelined the main campaign and I saw a mission. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that later. Well, guess what? You get to a certain progress, you put the chapter over in the next chapter, and you can't go back and get that. And you miss out on accessories, you miss out on guards, and you missed out on cool quests, actually. So here's kind of what you're going to experience in the quest line. You're going to have battles. These are the main story big ones. You're going to have requests. These are typically like one-on-one with companions. You're going to have trainings. These are optional ways to increase your skill points by completing specific combat tasks, like, hey, use 3 battle art chains. These are going to be given by NPCs throughout the world map. You want to collect them all. Skirmishes are small battles with little rewards, not that much on peace, which is the area-based mechanic for also getting more accessories and other loot. And then you're going to have missions. These are going to be side quests, which I'm referencing here. Do them before completing the main story. Do not rush. Complete all of this stuff if you can. And you want to do is basically grab everything you can in the area and complete it before moving and advancing to the battles, if you're a completionist and want the most power. The campaign is extremely long, especially if you watch the cutscenes and you're really involved with the NPCs and talk to them. Do not rush. It will take a very long time, because if you rush, you're going to skip a bunch of missions, you're going to miss accessories, miss some cool cutscenes and story, and regret it. Trust me. Okay, next up is number 4, in setting up your skills. This took me a long time of getting my butt handed to me to figure out the combat. I'm going to give you a few combat tips, but this is the most important one. When skills in Dynasty Warriors Origin are called battle arts, they require bravery to use. This is your resource. You can get this resource by striking enemies. You can get it via perfect evading, perfect blocking, getting this little specific tiny window where you activate the block or dodge exactly at the right moment. And you can even get it through consumables and something else called rage. But the most important thing to do is set up your skill bar so it's very usable. 1, you want a low bravery cost damage skill. Number 2, you want a high bravery cost damage skill. Number 3, you want a special art low cost. I'll tell you what that is in a second. And number 4, you want mobility and range. Why do you want all this? I'm glad you asked. The low bravery cost battle art skill. This is going to ensure you have something to break enemies' fortitude, and when a light or heavy attack won't cut it, you just need to get through that last little bar. Fortitude is a yellow or red icon above the enemy's health bar. It kind of acts like a shield. After you break through this, you can do what's called an assault. This is like a free damage, 3 to 5 seconds, where you're just beating on the enemy and some of the enemies around there. So the enemy becomes staggered. So basically the gameplay loop is kind of avoiding damage, breaking this fortitude, doing some free damage, the enemy resets their bar, and rinse and repeat. So breaking this becomes critical for whittling down the health of really hard and challenging bosses. And low bravery can just push you through that last little bar to stun lock that enemy and do free damage and kill them. Next up is the high bravery cost. So this is going to be useful if you need an oh crap moment, you need to burn down a boss, you need to blow through their fortitude. It's great to build up bravery when you're fighting little NPCs or officers that aren't challenging. Don't feel like you need to blow your bravery all the time. You need to keep at least one on hand at all times. I'll explain why in a second. But start saving up in a high cost bravery skill. Some of them cost 7 or 8 bravery and they absolutely nuke NPCs and bosses. So what happens on the really tough battles is you're going to be saving up your bravery. You're going to be riding to an officer that's just about down. And if you jump off your horse and you have like nothing in the tank, you're not going to be able to nuke that boss down and go to the next location quickly. So you want to jump off, dump a huge bravery skill, blast everything, boom, rinse and repeat, go to the next area, save the next officer, get the next town flipped. So special arts, these are basically interrupts, and the enemy is going to turn orange, and you're going to have to use this in a really tight window. If the difficulty is high, it's going to be a very tight window. So if you're on the noob difficulty, great. It really gets you familiarized and you can change your difficulty at any time. So don't feel like you don't need to, you have to play 1 or whatever. If you're getting used to the game, set it low, get used to it, get this timing window down, the orange visual, and then boom, the special arts. Now there's going to be multiple special arts. Some of them are going to cost 1 bravery, 3, and so on. My advice is do not take the 3 bravery cost 1. The reason why is you're not going to have that much bravery when you need it. This is why I always say have the bravery special art of 1. So that way, when you see that orange pop up, you can boom, boop them and stun them. And if you don't, you're not going to be able to really avoid this attack. So getting this orange timing down, keeping 1 bravery in the tank, this will allow you to stop them when you need it most. And then lastly, you're going to have a skill for mobility or range. Some weapons' range of where they actually hit are very small in comparison to something like the wheel that can actually launch out projectiles. So my advice is have some type of skill that can close the gap quickly or rush forward and charge, or that shoots out a projectile at range. Because there's going to be some times you're just about to break the fortitude and get to that assault, but the enemy is just a little bit further away out of your reach. And if you don't have a mobility skill, especially if it's low cost, you're going to miss out on damage, and then they're going to reset, hit you hard, and it's going to be bad. Okay, next up is number 5, weapon leveling. So I screwed up this really bad, and hopefully you'll learn from my mistakes. Your overall progression in Dynasty Warrior Origin is weapon rank. So you increase your proficiency by killing enemies. However, you gain proficiency for all weapons, so it's not just the one that you equip. And when you go into battle, the one that you have equipped is obviously going to increase faster. So what I did is basically use the same weapon, stayed in my comfort zone, didn't experiment, and leveled very slowly. What you want to do is the exact opposite. So when you very first start the game, you can get a max rank of 8. After you beat the game, it'll unlock a few more ranks. So you don't want to stick with one weapon all the way to 8. What you want to do is start with the weapon, and as you get a new weapon, immediately equip it and go do some skirmishes, some low threat, not very hard, and experiment with it. Remember, the proficiency required to get to the next level is going to be really low. And once you hit that rank, it's going to increase your overall combat power and also possibly unlock new skill trees. So the weapon ranks are critical to getting the skill trees, which allow you to take passes, which allow you to get more powerful. Also, they're going to give you stat bonuses as well, and possibly skills or different combos. And even if you don't like the weapon, it's still useful in leveling and keeping all of the weapons kind of at the same rank. Especially when you get a new one, because it's going to be very quick to get that proficiency up to 2, 3, or 4 with just a few skirmishes or a couple missions, and take the missions, not the battles that are really hard because you'll be unfamiliar with them. This way, you'll be able to power level quickly. Another tip is this Arbor Green. I'm probably screwed that name up, but this is the consumable I talked about earlier. If you skipped ahead, which you shouldn't have, grants you double proficiency for the first 100 enemies or so. So what I do is I go into these skirmishes or battles that are not very challenging, and I'll take one of those and I'll take the other one that basically gives me 20 skill points, and I'll use them every single battle. So I'll Rambo through my proficiency and I'll get 20 skill points every skirmish. And as long as there's 100 enemies in there, I make the best use out of this and really ramp up my ranks, get them mostly close to even, so I can hit really fast ranks, getting me closer to the highest difficulty combat later on. Okay, another combat tip here is controls for weapon combos. So I hate to admit this, but I was button smashing, yeah, I know. And I just sit there and do light or heavy attacks constantly, and they're called normal or strong attacks. And so I was getting smoked and frustrated. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I'm noobing this. And weapons want you to do very specific things. So for instance, the sword is awesome because it rewards you for doing 4 light attacks and then 2 strong attacks. So you have this like combo system it really wants you to do. Other weapons want you to just mash the light attack buttons 6 times. Other weapons want you to do 3 strong attacks consecutively. And how do you know this? Well, the best thing to do is once you're unfamiliar with a weapon or you're coming back to it after a while of not playing it, simply activate it and go into controls once you're in combat, or you can actually hit test weapon, and then the controls will pop up and it'll give you all the various combos. You'll actually be adding to these combos while you're playing once you get more ranks. So once you start with the weapon, you go back to it after 4 or 5 ranks, you'll have a lot more combos and different things that you can do. The developers lace these controls with what you should pay attention to because the weapon's function is going to be way different compared to what their controls and combos are. Like the spear, for instance, has this unique attack that knocks enemies up if you block plus heavy attack at the same time. Talked about the sword already, 4 light attacks, 2 heavy. And then like the Pado or whatever the name that is, it's all about heavy attacks, doing 3 consecutive ones. So if you go from a sword to this Pado and you're sitting there mashing the light attack, you're like, man, this thing hits like a noodle. It might be a you problem. Look at the controls, make sure you're using what the developers want you to do. High, heavy, light, combination of the 2, or jumping mid-air combat, or so on. It will make a big difference to your overall gameplay and combat proficiency. Number 7 is Eagle Eye of the Sacred Bird. This is going to be a skill that you activate with the Q button on PC. What it's going to do is make a really annoying bird sound. Sorry about that. But it's going to allow you to scan around and see a bunch of details. And you really want to use this all the time when you're playing. It not just shows you enemy combatants, but a ton of information. So it's going to show you enemies' health bars and fortitude. Really useful to see who the big dog on the battlefield, or if anyone's low and you just need to go kill them quickly. It's also going to show your officers, their health bar, and if they're yellow bar, in trouble. It's going to show you breakable walls, interactable ladders, and it can show you pots with meat buns, and guards and tactics, which comes a little bit later in the game. So you need to basically use this and pan around, specifically when your officer is in trouble. I'll show you a little bit more about this later, but you're going to get audible sound and a text pop-up during this. And there's also a really important passive in the adept rank called Meat Perceiver. What it's going to do is show you green pots containing meat. Remember, healing is very challenging in this game. You're only going to be able to do it a few times with this meat that you bring or any consumables. So you're going to hit this and scan towers or bases to see if there's any leftover or unbroken meat that exists. You want to fill up before you set off to the next phase or the next battle. And if you're low and you have no more consumables left, some of the maps and indoor combat situations won't progress until you like charge or interact with an NPC. So depending on the battle situation, don't feel like you need to ramble off to the next objective if you're low or about to die. You can actually backtrack a lot of the times, scan quickly for these potable items, and get refilled on your consumables so you don't ramble off to the next thing and die. Constantly use this and scan, see where the hidden rooms are, see what items you can break, see where the HP is of your officers and your guys, and this is a valuable tool. So moving on to the same thing in that same vein, using this Sacred Bird is exploring the map. So take time to explore the map, especially at the beginning of the game. You're not going to have a whole lot of area to explore. You're like, well, this is a stupid tip. But pretty soon you're going to have a lot of different regions to go explore. And going back to an earlier point, if you don't complete the missions, harvest this material, and you ramble off to the next main campaign story, it might flip over to a new chapter and you just miss out on tons of material. So in open world, when you hit the Sacred Bird, it's going to show you a lot of detail. You can see different materials you can farm and harvest. It will show you a golden little trail to the main story quest or whatever you need to do next. But what I like best is it will show you icons really high and easy to see visually for different companion quests, for missions, and or the main story quest. And in the bottom right, it will show you the peace level. This is overall progressed by doing stories and so on with alternate rewards if you get to max level. So scan, make sure in the individual area that you hit up everything and try to complete it before doing the battle, especially if the chapter is going to progress, which most of the time you really don't know. Another thing that I found the hard way is before you move on to that battle and/or chapter, what you want to do is hit your map interface and mouse over the way shrines or the waypoints. Ironically, sometimes you can't even see all of the details on the map. They're hidden. It's not where you're looking directly. If you put your cursor over the waypoints, it will tell you if you're missing a battle, a mission, characters, and so on. So before you make any progress, you scan visually, use that Eagle Sacred Eye, but then you mouse over everything. Because there's a lot of times I miss 1, 2, 3 side quests, just not taking my time and looking over the way shrines and the waypoints and finding is there anything else left to do. Okay, number 9 is saving officers. I didn't understand this mechanic and screwed up a lot and had to repeat a mission like a noob because I didn't know what I was doing. So first thing you gotta know is your win-loss conditions are very different depending on the battle. Look in the top right or top left during battle preparations, it will tell you. Some of them are like, hey, you just can't die. Well, that's a very easy one. Some of them are like, hey, 3 NPCs cannot die. That's a very tricky one. So in those specific instances, your health and your overall survivability isn't nearly as important as your officers, companions, or allies that you have to protect. So the biggest tip for saving officers and what you want to do is, the mechanic for saving them or rescuing them, basically healing them, comes down to when you have this pop-up. It'll say, an ally is facing a desperate fight, assist at once. They're typically sub 50% health, and then how you know you can save them typically is their health bar will be like a yellow tinge. All you gotta do to rescue this player or NPC is just ride up to them. Get near in the vicinity and they'll get a flood of health. So in those really complex, big battles, sprawling, you're gonna be riding your horse from point to point to point, rescuing these allies or officers. Most of the time, it's worth doing versus finishing that last little enemy officer, because if you come back and you save these guys, they will be putting in work for you the entire time. So the more complex the fight, the more officers, the more you should be bounding, traveling, and then just dropping nukes. Huge bravery cost skills, rage, and then moving on to the next thing, rinse and repeat. Now, there's a really important passive that you can get, and that's called Refreshing Rescue. It boosts health recovery when rescuing an officer in a desperate fight. So when you take this passive, I don't know what it mathematically does, but it gives them officers or allies about 50% more health when you arrive. So they'll go from almost dead to 50 or 60% health. This is a massive boon to those really hard battles where you're riding around all the time. As soon as you can take this passive, it will make a world of difference and the game will be a lot easier. Okay, number 10, I'm going to try my best not to spoil this for you. So this is about the story. Again, hopefully no spoiler, but just in case you want to know, I was freaking out about chapter 3. There's an important decision you have to make. One of 3 different factions. The game has 5 chapters. Why I tell you this is I was wondering when the game would be over. I'm like, is this act 1, 2, and 3 like Baldur's Gate 3? Because they just went on and on and on and on. I was like, wow, this is so detailed and big. So you're going to have to make a choice and pick one of these 3 factions to support. They're all vying for power. And this kind of irreversible thing. And I was freaking out because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to start the game all over again. That's actually not true. Once you beat the main campaign, regardless of the story, what it unlocks is a cool post-game content. So this will allow you to rewind the story at any point and start from that place. Why I tell you this is it's really helpful because you're not going to be able to complete all the achievements if you're an achievement type of person, because you won't be able to complete all the missions. You won't be able to interact with all the companions based on this critical chapter 3 choice. So don't freak out if you get to chapter 3 and you're like, man, I don't want to choose this one, but I want to do this one as well. You don't have to start a new game. You don't have to do 15 different saves. You can just go back after you complete the main campaign. So this is why I've been telling you the whole time. Don't rush the main campaign. Do all the side content if you can, and you will be able to come back and do those individual stories again on a higher difficulty, the ultimate higher difficulty, the Ultimate Warrior, which is very, very, very hard and challenging. Okay, that's 10 mistakes, probably a lot more to avoid. I'm a noob, made them all. Hopefully this video saved you some time, energy, and frustration. If it did, do me a big favor. Hit that thumbs up, like, subscribe, do all the stuff. Leave me a comment. The algorithm loves them, even if you're making fun of me. Thanks for watching.